In case you don't know, Zook Hero Z is a series of bootleg games for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance developed by a Taiwanese game company called Vast Fame. The first Zook Hero game isn't really that well known, but a lot of people consider it one of the best Mega Man bootlegs, if not the best bootleg of all time. Oh yeah, and then there's the sequels, which are more or less just okay. The purpose of this video in particular is to give a certain story to almost all of the games in the series, since there's not a lot of story given in the sequels, or at all sometimes. Now, enough stalling, let's get to the games. Obviously, there are three characters who we need to mention first. Zook, the main protagonist of the first game, Dr. Meat, the titular antagonist, and Dr. Stevens, who we'll get to later. The backstory behind Dr. Meat and Dr. Stevens is pretty much the same as Dr. Light's and Dr. Wily's. They were both colleagues at an institute for learning how to build robots and machines. While Dr. Stevens wanted to create mostly tools and machines used to better humanity, Dr. Meat wanted to make sentient machines capable of rational thought and fighting. So, the two settled on making 4 different robots replicating the intelligence of the average human while having a mastery on certain abilities such as fire or excavation. These robots, known as Reploid Masters, were all built for different purposes, such as preventing a volcano from erupting, keeping the flowers in the forest growing, or just for combat in general. Unfortunately, the conflicting ideas of Dr. Meat and Dr. Stevens caused them to get into an argument. Both of the doctors had very different ideas on what to use the robots for, and eventually the Institute had expelled Meat, and Dr. Stevens removed the combat functions and free will from all the robots, with the former reducing their combat to only for self-defense, and removing the free will so they wouldn't go rogue and go on a rampage. Dr. Meat had gone missing a few days later, with no one having a guess as to where he went, and a few people thought he would never return. Meanwhile, Zook had just joined the police force and has been a great contribution to crime fighting in his city. Eventually, Zook had been so good at preventing crooks from mucking around that people had considered him a city hero, as they call it. Apparently, Dr. Meat had somehow brainwashed the Reploid Masters he and Stevens created, and now all of them had been wreaking havoc everywhere. Dr. Meat had also come across some guardians of the Earth and Sea and told them that all this havoc was humanity's doing, and that he could help them get back at the humans for doing so. Zook went out himself to fight the robot menace, but it was fruitless. In the heat of battle, he had been shot in the chest, losing a lot of blood and becoming unconscious. Later, the government had been issuing Dr. Stevens on what they can do, since 99% of their militia and army had been enslaved or killed by Dr. Meat. Stevens did the only thing he could do, and use one of his oldest creations. This creation was a suit of armor that could give the user superhuman capabilities and all kinds of weapons. Both Stevens and the government knew what had to be done. They had given Zook the suit, reviving him as the new legend that was Zook Hero Z. This had ended up being a very good idea, because left and right, Zook had been wiping out all the rogue robots. Zook's combat capabilities combined with the power of the armor, Stevens had created a true city hero. Zook had also been gaining the abilities from those Maverick Masters he had fought well against, making him even more powerful than before. Like nothing, he had completely snapped against those Maverick Reploids out of Dr. Meat's control. Later, Zook had destroyed Dr. Meat's laboratory, but after what had happened there, Meat had retreated towards his aircraft in order to flee, and Zook, being the do-gooder he is, gave chase. Zook then raids the airship and does battle with Dr. Meat on his own hovercraft. Dr. Meat follows up by saying, "You persistent fool! This isn't over," before running for his goddamn life. Admittedly, it's kind of a cowardly move. You don't just... whatever. Okay, Meat. You do you. Eventually, when the aircraft had landed, Zook had landed upon an unknown area, and Dr. Meat was nowhere to be seen. He pressed on, however, hoping that he'll wind up finding Dr. Meat sooner or later. I stuttered there, but whatever, I'm keeping it in. Zook had later come across a strange robot that started attacking him for no reason, and naturally, Zook fought the robot and won. However, instead of dying like other robots Zook had fought, once they had been damaged enough, they stood down. It hasn't stopped attacking them. After all was said and done, the strange robot explained why they were so on edge. They had recently also done battle with someone who vaguely looks like Zook, losing to them as well. I am Pluto. I'm sorry for attacking you, but recently a giant fortress had popped up here on my home planet. It's starting to worry me, Pluto said. Zook had asked them, "Do you know where this fortress is?" To which Pluto responded, "Yes. If you keep following this trail of mechanical floor, you should eventually see a giant stronghold with a skull on it. It's unmissable." And with that, Zook and Pluto had parted ways, and Zook pressed forward. Zook had eventually come across Dr. Meat's mechanic city of Cosmos, a giant castle with a skull on it. Why even call it a city, Zook thought. Weird naming aside, the castle had a giant M on it. This definitely meant this was where Dr. Meat scurried off to. The inner sanctum was not without its challenges too. Not only did Zook refight all the Maverick Masters he dueled with already, but he also fought what was an evil clone version of him. It was still no challenge for our hero, because in due time he had conquered all tasks and went out to finally battle Dr. Meat for the last time. Zook, after all this time, finally fought Dr. Meat's grandiose machine. It was a fierce battle. The shell of Meat's skull tank was harder to pierce than solid concrete, and his attack certainly felt like Zook had been being pelted by solid concrete. And so, the battle ensued for a while. I'm just gonna be on this frame for a second. Song's a banger. Go check out Rush Jet 1. They make some good stuff. After a long battle, Zook had defeated Dr. Meat and destroyed his machine. Zook had arrested Meat afterwards, true to his Robotocop nature. Dr. Meat's base had also been destroyed by the repaired Reploid Masters that had been brought back to their senses by Dr. Stevens. Thus, the world regains former peace. For now. Okay, you get all that? No? Okay. So, this is kind of a little speech at the end. I'm not going to cover all the games in this video, even though I stated that at the beginning. Just the thing is, I've kind of been working on this thing for quite a while now, and I feel like I would probably burn myself out and destroy my crappy video editor if I did continue. But I'll probably work on this a little more, because I had fun with this. It's unlike the other stuff I do, but I had fun making it, and I think that's what matters. So, I don't really have much to say other than thank you for watching, and holding out for a Zook Hero Z. What kind of outro was that? Jeez.